Strategies for Deposing CNAs in Nursing Home Cases. Stick around. Hello out there. Welcome back to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. My name is Rob. I will be your host. For this episode, we have a fantastic episode for you this week. We're going to be talking about the role of the CNA in a typical nursing home and strategies and just information about deposing CNAs. What are you trying to get out of them? What admissions are you looking for? What documents maybe do you want to look at beforehand? These type of things. But we're not doing it alone. We have a real professional nursing home abuse trial lawyer, Victoria Schall, will be joining us a little bit later to talk about all things deposing CNAs. All right, but first, it's time for the nursing home regulation question of the week. I would say that the difficulty for this one is going to be medium hard. This is kind of spicy. So if you get this one correct, give yourself, I'm going to say 83 points. Under 42 USC 483.20C, the nursing home is required to keep all assessments in the resident's active records, A, from the previous 6 months, B, from the previous 12 months, or C, from the previous 15 months. And the answer is C. The nursing home is required to keep all comprehensive assessments of each resident in that file, in that chart, for at least the previous 15 months. And now it's time for the ChatGPT generated nursing home regulation joke of the week. It's everybody's favorite. Just as gentle reminder, everybody, that this is AI's attempt to blend humor and United States code, so set your phasers to radically disappointed.
The ChatGPT generated nursing home regulation joke of the week.
Skynet.
And there you are, folks. Further proof the singularity is at least a few Olympic Games away. All right, now it's time to get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about deposing CNAs and all the things that entails, but we're not doing it alone. We have the fantastic trial lawyer, Victoria Schall, a New Jersey Supreme Court certified civil trial attorney. She's dedicated her career to advocating for the elderly and nursing home residents. She has litigated nursing home abuse and neglect claims since 2010. Victoria holds a certificate in adult development and aging and has volunteered in various care facilities. She previously served as an elder law staff attorney and is licensed to practice in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. Victoria has her own show, just like I do. She's got her own show called Advocating for the Aging, which you can find on RVN TV. And we're so excited to have Victoria on the show. Victoria, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Rob. It's great to see you. How are you?
I am rocking and rolling. I cannot complain. So happy to have you on the show. You're not only a fellow nursing home lawyer, you're also a host of a show. And I mentioned this briefly in your introduction before you came on, but I actually wanted to have you talk for a second about your show. And that show is Advocating for the Aging, which is on RVN TV, and we'll have a link in the show notes to that. Everybody should go and check it out. It's every other week, but if you could just shine a spotlight on your program really quickly, Victoria.
Sure. It's called Advocating for the Aging, and what I've done is, I was reached out to host a television show, and I try to bring in experts from all over the areas of practice, not just nursing homes, assisted livings, but also within the community, elder people that are speaking about elder fraud, elder abuse in the community, in facilities, experts that are doctors, nurses, the ombudsman, working on trying to get somebody from the Department of Health to come on. But the information is so critical that, to understanding the industry, because I think, as you know, and I know, oftentimes people are coming to us because they find out about the industry a little too late. and then something's already happened and they didn't have that opportunity to be able to better advocate for themselves or their loved ones.
Fantastic. Well, now you're a guest on my show, so
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
it's going to be great. So I wanted to have you on. You walk the walk. Like you try cases. They're nursing home abuse cases, and one of the things that I wanted to delve into, which I haven't done on this podcast before, is the how a CNA might play a part in the evidence that you might have for nursing home abuse on behalf of your client. So the first question, just the 40,000-foot view question, which is, what is a CNA and what role does a CNA play in the nursing home?
Okay. So a CNA is a certified nursing assistant. Oftentimes they can get their certification by doing courses, general courses within the community. I think a lot of community colleges offer certified nursing assistant, certifications that they can get. And what happens is oftentimes why they're the to me they're kind of the crux of the case outside of a director of nursing or somebody in administration to really talk about how things got screwed up from an administrative perspective. The aides are really the people that are providing that hands-on 24/7 care to people. However, they're also the ones who are most understaffed, undertrained, and underpaid. So you find people that reach a certain burnout on trying to provide care in a system that isn't set up for them. So I've often been asked, do you sue nurses and aides? And I never sue nurses and aides. I only go after the facility, and then I really, really go after the administration, because when we're talking about it, they can often be the victims of the system itself. So that's what a CNA in a grand perspective means to me. I think they're also really important because, like I said, they're the ones providing that hands-on care. So you want to know what they know as much as you can. Before it often became really difficult to get CNA logs. So what happens in a nursing home case is they don't write in a residence chart typically, right? So when we're evaluating a case, and let's say we're looking at like a pressure ulcer case, and one of the crux things for a pressure ulcer case is turning and repositioning, right? It's the cornerstone for prevention of wounds. And the aides are the ones who are doing the turning and repositioning. So how do we know what was done and what wasn't done if we're not able to see what the aides say was done and not done? So years later, we're going back and trying to figure that out. But when we changed over, when a lot of the cases have changed over to now using a database system called point click care or some other sort of computer generated documentation system, they're the ones having to document that the activities of daily living. So the bathing, dressing, cleaning, turning, repositioning, feeding, all those sorts of things. They're the ones who are now documenting that information. So it's really helpful to us to be able to see that from one perspective or another. Did they do it? Did they not do it? Did they lie about it? All those things are going to pop up, and those are the ones that like I said, that's why they're the most important people, because we're seeing what they're doing on the hands-on perspective.
I think it's a common misconception, at least with some of my clients, that everybody that walks in that room is a registered nurse, and
Right.
that the registered nurses are doing all the heavy lifting, which is, as you mentioned, is absolutely not true. I mean, it's in some of my cases, it's basically 90% of the times that resident has been touched by somebody at that facility, it's the CNA, and they're not doing assessments. They're doing what you have described, which is the activities of daily living. Is your pillow propped up? Are you turning, repositioning, toileting, helping with transferring, all that kind of stuff, not the critical nursing care. So I feel like a lot of people don't really understand that the CNA are as you mentioned, the cornerstone. Like, they're doing a lot of that heavy lifting.
Right.
You mentioned a second ago about how you wouldn't name a CNA as a defendant. What are maybe some of the broad reasons why you don't do that?
Well, number one, I think insurance. So they're typically covered under the facility's insurance. So it doesn't, I'm not getting any additional insurance plan by suing them individually. And then the other issue is, from a trial perspective, if they are, gosh, they may have separate counsel and then they're sitting at a counsel's table as an actual defendant. And from a trial perspective, that's not something, again, I'm trying to show that they're the ones that are really also, in addition to my client being a victim, that they're also victims as well of the system that they're being placed in. So I don't want to place another victim at a counsel's table in front of a jury. That's just not, that's not the, to me, that's not the right trial strategy for handling these cases, and really trying to help a jury to understand what happened here. So those are the main reasons. I have, that being said, the only time that I really have sued an actual aide, a CNA, or any sort of nurse, is if there's been an actual physical act by that nurse or that aide.
Right.
And it's
Intentional, like intentional violence or something. Yeah.
right, a sexual assault, a physical violence. I had one where a resident was, it's horrible to say, but a resident was beaten in his own face with his own soiled diaper, that an
Oof.
aide, right. So, and then he ended up passing away. He was a very, very happy, lovely man. And I think the trauma of everything that he went through, he went downhill very quickly after that. So, it's one of those questions of do I not, right? But yeah, sometimes, again, from an insurance standpoint, you also have to consider whether there's an insurance exclusion, from many of their policies for intentional acts.
Hmm.
So that's that. It may have more of a legal reason as to doing it than it does to an actual, any other reason for them being named or not named.
So we have a case against a nursing home, and you've now made it into your discovery phase. Um, are you deposing the CNAs? And if you're deposing the CNAs, typically in a typical case, what information are you wanting to elicit from them?
Sure. I know, I mean, I've had a number of conversations with my colleagues, and we're all kind of, falling down at this point of like, should we even do this? Other people, really all I need is the director of nursing, or somebody in administration, that handles a lot of the other things that are going on. However, I do think that they are important to your case, but you got to make sure they're, honestly related to your client in a particular way. So I'm selective about who I choose, right? So if it's a fall case and an aide, I would want to try to get the aide that either found that person in order to try to get additional facts about how they found that person, because oftentimes the investigation that the facility does isn't really thorough, or the notes that we have isn't really thorough, and I want to be able to lock them in on what they say they did or say happened, or how they found that person. um I think it's important, as I always end up saying, it's kind of like a lawyer answer, but you really have to know your case. When you're handling these cases, you really have to understand your case and understand it from a hands-on ground kind of thought process. So there may be a case where I don't necessarily feel I need to take an AIDS deposition, but 9 times out of 10, I definitely am, because I really want to know what's going on there. What's really happening at this facility, and how are the people who are providing the most amount of care to someone, how do they feel about it? So my depositions of them are generally not, I try not to be adversarial. Obviously, often, they feel that I think they feel that it's adversarial because there's a defense attorney and there's an action that's been brought against, the facility itself. But what's really helpful, I had another colleague, hate to go this direction, but another colleague that also had said at one point in time, they really don't know anything. And I said, well, isn't that the point? Like, that's also the point about taking their deposition, is the people, if they're going to turn around and say, we did the best, we did everything we could, but the people who are the hands-on people don't know anything about anything, then what's really going on there? And I think that's a missed opportunity if you're not not taking somebody's deposition, or because you feel they just don't know anything. The other point I will say is I've gotten some great information out of CNA's testimony, particularly when it comes to falls or turning and repositioning, and in pressure ulcer care and treatment, or I think when it comes to falls, I've had situations where they don't even know how to define a fall, or at least they've as in the deposition, they don't know how to define a fall. And I'll give you an example. There was a matter I handled where a resident was had psychiatric issues, as well as needed physical assistance, as well as psychiatric issues. And most of the time, the staff of the facilities are not trained. They're only trained as to maybe trained to handling dementia, Alzheimer's, those sorts of mental cognition status issues. They're not trained to handle, bipolar, schizophrenia, all that sort of stuff. They're never trained on that. So, this particular resident had some mental health issues. Would get up in the middle of the evening, and would strip down, and instead of training the staff to walk the person from front, stare them face to face and try to talk to them through it. The aide had gone behind this resident and tried to push her back to bed. And in doing so, when she when she pushed her back to bed, she ripped away from her, scared, obviously, fell to the floor, and had multiple fractures. The aide, not knowing what to do, picked her up, put her back into bed, pulled a sheet over, right? So, and then went on without telling anybody anything that happened. And she was found, however many hours later, in extreme amount of pain. So, the case itself, it's, you have the fall, but then you also have the cover up, but you also have the facility. And what did they do to try to train this particular staff member about this? And she tried to say in her deposition that she didn't fall. And I was like, oh, okay, let's get to this. My resident was in a standing position, and then she was on the ground. What do you call that? Like, how do you define that? And did that ever change for you after this happened? And, oh yeah, I finally was trained, and they told me that it was a fall, and
Wow.
right. Do you see?
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
you can get some insane tidbits out of people, but you kind of got to help them get there, and to help them to understand, that this is not, you're not coming after them. You're trying to really understand what happened to your residents. So I know that was a long-winded answer to your question, but I do take them. I think that they're very important, and I think that they can provide valuable information if you really know how to guide them to get there.
Is there do you have a particular type of rule? Like I've had attorneys on the show that will say, I only care to have the personnel file, the policies and procedures, and obviously the chart, and I don't need anything else. I'm not going to hold it up, and I'm going to take the depo. Like, is there any tip in a typical case? I know every case is different, but is there a certain document that you typically are going to make sure that you have before you schedule the depo of a CNA?
Huh. Well, that's a question.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, look, aides are different, right? Because again, they're not generally documenting in the chart. So obviously, if I've asked for them, they've shown up somewhere, right?
Mhm.
So I want their sections of the chart, but I also want to have, anything that might conflict with their testimony. Also, if you have any state surveys, I was just talking with somebody else recently about surveys, and they were like, how do you get surveys in? And I was like, well, why do you want to get it in? Did you not get the information from the survey through the people that testified, right? Because
Mhm.
what'll happen sometimes is the state surveyors may go in and investigate what happened to the resident. And then if they find a citable offense through the violation of the state or federal regulations, like the ones behind you, the federal regs behind
All
you,
right. Nice work. There you go.
right. So if they find a violation of those state or federal regulations, they're going to include all the people that they talk to, right? And they're not going to list them by name, but they'll be CNA1, CNA2, LPN2, right? RN1, DON. So you want to find out who those people are, and that's also a document that you'd want to utilize in order to get facts out, right? Because I've had situations too where they go in to testify about what's in the nursing home chart, and they're saying one thing, but they told the state surveyor something else,
Right.
right? So, at that point in time, you have to call in to question the veracity of what they're testifying to. And again, you're really just trying to get to the heart of the matter of what happened, but you could end up getting, some great for your case, a great conflicting testimony from what they may have told a state surveyor, which, is done under penalty, and then in testimony in court, which could also be perjury as well. So if you want to make sure that you've gotten your state surveys, that you've reviewed them, the policies and procedures for me, they're more important for a director of nursing or an administrator, somebody in an administrative position. Look, oftentimes I may even take a deposition in a nursing home case and not have the policies and procedures yet, right? Because one of the things I think you need to do in handling these cases is to really understand the regulations and understand the basic nursing standard of care. And if you understand those things, if they have policies and procedures that don't match that, that's a bigger problem, but that's an administrative problem. So from a CNA perspective, I don't absolutely need to have the policies and procedures there with me beforehand. I'm more looking for what happened with my resident, what's going on in this facility, do you like it here? Right, like, one of the questions I always ask in a deposition of a CNA, and it doesn't have to anything to do with the documents, is why did you come to work here? Why'd you come to work here? And I've gotten some insane answers to that question. Oftentimes one of the questions I also ask is, what is the purpose of operating these facilities? What is the purpose of having a nursing home? Right. And without fail, you get most of the time the answer is to help people care for people who can't care for themselves, right? Something along those lines, a good human answer. I will tell you, I end up getting answers from people that are like, look, there was a job opening and I took it. Okay.
Right.
Do you talk to the residents? No, I don't. I just have a job to do. So I get in and do my job and get out. Okay. So, it's kind of going back to that whole human factor. And I'm not trying to prove my case necessarily through an aid, but you're setting that stage for the systemic issues that are going on in that facility.
This
Um,
is this is why I love this podcast. Like, this is something that I learn something every week, and that I've never considered asking such a question to anybody. Like, hey man, why'd you even take this job? Like, I've never asked that in my entire life. And I guess from what I hear you say, you get some good admissions from that.
It's just bonkers. What you can get sometimes with people saying, why oftentimes you'll also get like, look, I've had situations where it's kind of backfired too, right? But I'd rather have that question now than have them get on the stand and then, defense attorneys asking them that question, right?
Right.
Um,
And it's like,
I
oh,
want,
I've took care of my grandmothers, and like I'm blah, 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 and they're an angel, right? Yeah, at least get it out of
right.
the depo.
I want to know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I'd rather do it in deposition because I'll tell you, there's also was a case that I handled where staff testified when I asked those questions. They're like, I was on a wait list to come and work here. This place is amazing, right? And you're like,
Oh
oh,
wow. Okay. Womp womp.
right. But you want to know that, right? And it wasn't just that one person. There was a list of people that was, this place is amazing and I love working here. And
Right.
so I don't be afraid to ask the question, but always follow up with, I think for me, what I learned in handling these cases was obviously, early on I had, we all have outlines, right? To try to help us. Cause when we're doing depositions, you're not, you don't know everything that you want to be asking. But step away from that outline every now and again and ask the question, why? Don't be afraid to ask why. Yes, you work here. Why? Why do you
Mhm.
work here? This place has like the worst the worst rating on this, and that says this. Do you agree with that? Like, why would you want to, and did you ever leave? Why'd you leave?
Mhm.
And you start to see people squirm about that question of why did you leave, right? Personal reasons. Okay, why? What personal reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Did your family move and you went to another facility that's in another location? Where do you work now? Oh, you work 5 minutes down the road. Okay, why? Like, what was really going on here? And I think it's really important when you're trying to figure out the story of your resident to figure out those answers of why. Why was the staff having issues or not having issues?
Interesting. Okay, one final strategic question for you.
Sure.
So I feel like there are a certain group of attorneys that will say, I just want to get the admin and the DON right up front in terms of the depositions and then work my way down or work my way up. And there are some that are like, I want to get to the heart of the matter, and the CNAs are the ones that have all that information, and I want to start there.
Sure.
Do you have in a typical case, are you on one side or the other, or does it differ? What's your approach in terms of order of deposition?
I don't have an order. I think it depends on the case that you're handling, and I think it depends on the facts that you have. No matter who you have go first, they're going to prepare you for the next. They're going to prepare their people for the next people, right? Or you think that they are. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. To me, I think it's just important to understanding your case and understanding what you're trying to show as to who you really want to have go first, right? I've caught facilities in a host of issues just by not having that strategy of who do I take first. And information that this one person says, then later on this person says something else, and you're just like, okay, here's the testimony of this person. Do you agree or disagree with what they're saying? Right? You can catch them in various ways, but I don't think it has anything necessarily to do with the order.
Gotcha.
Just in my experience, it hasn't. But
no. I mean, that's hey.
I could get chastised otherwise for that one.
No. I've at least through this podcast alone, I've learned everybody has their own way that they do stuff. So I don't judge anybody's opinion about that stuff. Anyway. Well, Victoria, this has been fantastic. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with us.
Sure, absolutely. Anytime, Rob. Thank you so much for having me on. Happy to help out in any possible way.
Well, folks, I hope that you found this episode entertaining and educational. If you have a suggestion for topics that you want to see me cover here, please let me know. If you have a suggestion for a guest that you would like to see me talk to, please let me know that as well. New episodes of the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast will debut every single Monday, wherever you get your podcast from. You can also view the podcast on YouTube or on our website, which is nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. And with that, folks, we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Nursing Home Abuse Podcast. Nothing said on this podcast, either by the host or the guest, should be construed as legal or medical advice, nor is intended to create an attorney-client relationship between the host or their guest and the listener. New episodes for now are available every other Monday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on your favorite podcast app, as well as on YouTube and our website, nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. Again, that's nursinghomeabusepodcast.com. See you next time.